Hello, so this video is covering chapter 13 of our promo text, talking about things like public relations, influence marketing, start touching a little bit on social media, corporate advertising as well. So should be a fun chapter. So here's what we're going to talk about. Once again, PR, public relations, how does that play? How does that kind of influence the world of integrated marketing, communications, and advertising? Some of the objectives behind PR, some strategies to get it done. Talking about influencer marketing, we kind of briefly touched on that in chapter 12, but we'll kind of take it a little bit further here. And then talk about, kind of this corporate advertising and how social media and online plays a big part in corporate advertising nowadays as well. So jumping into it, when we're talking PR, public relations, really kind of what is it? Basic, it's usually a group, often tied in with a marketing group, but who their whole goal is to foster goodwill. So it's to build relationships, to build connections with whoever it may be. Sometimes most of the times it's with customers that they're out there, but it could be other people as well. It could be, internal employees trying to buy off on things. It could be communities. It could be, government agencies. It's called lobbying most of the time. So it can be any targeted group, or it could be at the population as a whole. But it's this idea that we're trying to build some sort of connection, some sort of relationship that leads to goodwill. When we say goodwill, that's like the added benefit of the doubt, like the good feelings that come along with the company as well. So it's became really kind of big and popular. 60s and into the 70s is where kind of PR got its a lot of its start. Sometimes you refer to this too as like spin doctoring, this idea of trying to take something that may be bad and trying to place it as good. Kind of is where the negative connotation of PR gets a lot, as well as that kind of lying aspect of it. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. That PR, if it's done right, and I think especially with the advent, or at least the progression of our online kind of social media interactions, companies get called on that a lot more too. So you can't get away with it as much as you could maybe in, before the turn of the century. And that's kind of the basic idea of PR, that we're trying to build that connection, trying to increase our reputation with our customers or whatever stakeholders. So objectives, once we talked about that goodwill, definitely a part of it. It can be promoting a good or service. So, it can take the form of maybe a true kind of marketing aspect too, but kind of done in a more personal way. Internal communications, definitely a part of public relations. That trying to get companies to, I was at Weyerhaeuser when they did a corporate headquarters move, trying to get internal employees to buy off on this idea of a big internal change often falls on this public relations department. Counteracting negative publicity definitely goes into this. Sometimes this is called crisis management, and a lot of time you have to have these plans, or at least basic outlines of plans done way in advance, because you never know what kind of negative can happen. Lobbying. So when we're talking, especially for big companies trying to get government or local or national or state or whatever it might be to do some sort of action that might help the company, it falls on the PR group. And also just kind of the more modern term of it is just giving advice and counsel. So more and more as we talk about like the social media aspect of this, things like how to use our product effectively kind of fall into this PR realm as well. So, how is it done? Press releases. When I came up through, actually, I got my undergraduate degree in communications and public relations. So this would have been, early 2000s. Press releases were still very much, the thing. This idea that you would write a short burst, that you would send it out to magazines and, newspapers, and they would take that article and reprint it inside their publications. It's still done, but not nearly to the way it was before. Much more you see things now is things like blogs, or kind of press notices, and that's just because of the dying of the press more than the ineffectiveness of the press release. That the big the outlets that use these kind of things aren't necessarily around anymore, or they've changed function, or how we get our news has changed function. So people can do their own press releases without having, you can go onto your Facebook page and post the information instead of having to rely on another company to, put that out there for you. But then again, that thing can be retweeted or reshared or whatever it might be. That's kind of the modern form of press release. Feature stories are still pretty heavy. And this kind of gets into like the profile aspect of things. Go to our Highline like YouTube account or Highline Marketing, right? You're going to see things like student profiles. Those are really popular. Kind of gets students engaged. It gets the community engaged in what we're here for. So things like those feature stories, newsletters, especially for the internal communication. Really, I get a couple different employee newsletters. You probably get some sort of newsletters as well. They can be used for pushing out marketing, but they can use for internal communications as well. Press conferences, interviews, we still see this, especially for kind of big companies when something big is going on. Sponsored events and publicity, we talked a little bit about in chapter 12 as well, but this ability that they're the ones that are kind of managing that, kind of in partnership with marketing teams, because it's more customer facing, kind of customer communication facing at least. So ethics, that this what they're talking about in this case is what's more commonly referred to as a publicity stunt. And publicity stunts fall into this PR slash advertising group. But it was a cartoon, a show on the Cartoon Network. We're trying to, drum up some publicity. So they, around Boston, they put these 40 boxes out there that had a blinking light on it. And that if people found them, something great happened. I can't remember exactly what it was. But, there's this negative aspect of it too, that, people walking down the street see black boxes that are blinking. You think to yourself, this is probably something bad instead of something good. Let me go open it. So, there's this negative side of publicity stunts as well. And we've all seen publicity stunts in one form or another. They can be really small, they can be really big. But, here's kind of an example that the book talked about with these boxes. So PR strategies, it's either proactive or reactive. And that's kind of the world in summarized in general. You're either proactive and you do things before you need to and you reach out, or you're reactive and you wait things for it to happen, and when they happen that you deal with them as they come along. So proactive PR, these are things like the press releases that I'm pushing out, trying to publicize, trying to build some communication, talking to authors, talking to influencers, whoever it may be, to get them to talk about my product. Reactive, happens at the end. That that something goes out there and people see it, and that there's positive reviews or negative reviews. How do I interact, or how do I respond to the positive or negative reviews that may be coming? In crisis situations, how do I have a plan? Do I have who at the very least you get caught up in the weird stuff like who's even going to talk in front of a camera? I worked for a company and we had this big crisis situation, and the news showed up at our door. And it was one of those things, okay, we know we needed to say something, but, I wasn't in a position at the time to be the one to say things. So I wasn't going to do it. But then my boss wasn't there, and then like other managers weren't there. So we all just kind of looked at each other. There was no plan for how we were going to get the information that we needed to get out there to the news that was basically in front of us. So, how do you compose this plan of action for such, especially for bad things? Situation analysis, standing back, looking at what is the situation you're in, what resources are available, trying to get all the possible, ideas on paper, coming up with the objectives. So, depending on what our situation analysis tells us of what resources are available, these are the kind of things we would like to do, with the rationale of why we would like to do them. That it's not just because we think it should be this. It's that there's a goal behind it, that it interacts with who we are as a brand. That information we're putting up there, how we're going to do it, big part of this. Most of today, it's things like your social media presence, right? Say even something small like a couple of weeks ago, Highline, there was a snow day, right? So situation analysis, they looked at, okay, this is what we're going to do. Objectives, we want to keep people safe. That's the rationale. Okay, now how are we going to tell people? Highline has a system in place where they can send out text, they can send out emails, and then that content is actually, most of the time the content's already pre-written, or at least a template of that is pre-written to send out. So kind of the steps that would go into that PR plan for effective communication. So globally, talking, the chapter always likes talking about globally, but here's kind of a more, maybe real world example of a growing brand, right? Guinness Beer Company in Ireland. As you can imagine, if you're going to Ireland, if you're going to be in Dublin, I mean, it's probably something you want to go and see, right? So, as it became the Guinness became bigger and bigger, more people started coming to who they are, or coming to their location to figure out who they are, and get a little bit of history and see where it started. So much so that it started overwhelming them. So that wasn't their business. Their business isn't to talk. Their business is to make beer. But the PR people were able to step in and say, okay, what are people actually wanting? Why are they coming to us? Well, they're coming to us because they want to learn about us. So they were able to kind of come up with a solution to this. That they were able to come up with, I think they called the Guinness Storehouse, 5-story building kind of next door where people could go and look and get the education that they wanted and kind of see the facilities and feel good about that. They build that connection with the company without them kind of going into the showroom and kind of being turned away. So it helps build that connection with the people that actively came to you and wanted to build that connection. Influencer marketing. We talked a little bit about this in chapter 12. Bringing it a little bit more here that that there's people out there for whatever reason, whether they be famous, whether they have a lot of followers, whether they just happen to have a medium through which they can share, but they have the ability to help you or help get your product or your company out there through. I mean, most of the time we think of this today as social media, the product things like product placement or product features or just recommendations like I use this product. But it could be a lot of different things. But there are people who that's just their job. And you should think about why, like the Kardashians. Why are the Kardashians famous? Well, they're famous because they're famous, which is a really bad thing to say. But why are they big in marketing? It's because what they say to their followers actually happens. When they say I recommend this product, companies see 10,000 times increases in the number of people that might buy something based off of that recommendation. So definitely, it impacts influencer marketing, impacts advertising, impacts marketing. But the influencers don't necessarily have to be famous either. Influencers can be you and me, and it can be the masses. You don't often think about it, but Amazon is actually a platform for influencer marketing. It's peer-to-peer reviews that you can go on there. You can read 5,000 reviews, average 4 stars, talking about what's going on. So at the very kind of big level, like, high paid influencer, famous kind of marketing, but even in more so, people just like that real world connection of a review and a good talk as well about a product. So when we're talking peer-to-peer influences, and specifically like more people oriented instead of the masses, this idea that you have these talkers, they're the people that are kind of front there having the product. You provide them with topics. So you provide them with the marketing material that you would like for them to cover, where they can talk up the products, that they have the right tools to promote their conversations. This could be anything from a blog or a social media site, but they can go out there and use those tools. But you also want to make sure that that you as the company are taking part in this conversation as well, that you're able to interact with it and ultimately track what's going on. Like, I want to be able to see that this kind of influencer marketing or this kind of influence or advertising has this 10x or 10 times the sales happened of it. So being able to do the statistics and track what's happening is very important as well. Okay, leads us into social media. Social media, kind of hinted on it throughout this, but it is very much the leveling of big and small companies. Through social media, even small local companies have the power to reach out and put a message in front of people on their networks. That if you have a Facebook account, me as a business, I could go target you based off of demographics such as age, gender, race, or psychographic things like influences, like what you like to deliver a message to you. And you see these social media kind of advertisements out there all the time. Whether it be a short little videos, whether it be product reviews, whether it be pictures, whether it be whatever it is, they're trying to build connections. They're trying to build communities. So by trying to build those communities in social media, we're really talking about public relations. So you don't think about that social media marketers kind of as being public relations people, but they are. They're trying to create connections, trying to create conversation around their product. And it's not necessarily, oh, here's my ad, look at my ad. It's a lot of asking questions. Did you like this? Did you not like this? Tell me about this kind of experience, right? So trying to garner that feedback that's ultimately going to be useful to even more and more people who may come across that conversation have similar questions. So here's a graphical representation, like in the old days, traditional, on the left there, right, brand, consumer. We did communication back and forth. But kind of this new world that two of my consumers can be out there having a conversation about my product, sharing thoughts and ideas with me never even being involved. So that's kind of the beauty of social media, is they can take that upon themselves. The scary part of it is too, is you lose a lot of control over the situation. That when they say something, sometimes you can respond to it, but a lot of times you can't. So influence, what people think is quality and not quality, takes on a life of its own through these kind of reviews, either through social media or things like Amazon reviews. Okay, kind of wrapping this up to corporate advertising. So a lot of times when we're talking advertising, we're talking about, trying to build a product most of the time. Well, but that's not always the case. Like a lot of times you want to talk about the entirety of the company. So it's not just about one product, trying to grow one line. It's about trying to say who we are as a company and trying to build, followings for that product based off of who you are as a company. Think about Nike, right? Nike, most of the advertising that Nike does isn't for a particular product. You will see you'll see the, Jordan shoe or, kind of very specific stuff sometimes. But most of the time, it's just something out there. It's an athlete working out with a Just Do It logo, right? They're trying to say, Nike, this is our personality. This is who we are. If you like this kind of stuff, come talk to us, right? That they're very intentional of how they do that. It can be the flip side of it too. Talk about a company like Patagonia. Okay, Patagonia, they most of what they do is actually cause-related advertising. So they're trying to do things like save our planet. They're trying to build a following of like-minded people who have that in mind as what for a company, instead of maybe just traditional come buy our things. And it actually worked for them. They get people to spend more on items than they could elsewhere. Like sometimes a Patagonia jacket's $100, and you could buy a similar jacket, generic jacket, for $30. But you do it, like I've heard people say, oh, I do it because I support Patagonia and I support their mission. So this idea of green marketing is a big part of that, or sustainable marketing. Relies into this idea of advertising and corporate advertising, trying to identify who you are in the grand scheme of things as well. Here's kind of the three phases: image advertising, advocacy advertising, and cause-related advertising. So image advertising, think Nike, right? So they're trying to up their image. This is who we are, trying to put themselves out there. Advocacy, that they're trying to promote some sort of greater idea, some greater plan. This is, we talked, I think, a few chapters ago about things like Got Milk advertising, which was an idea that, it was done by the entire Dairy Council, trying to kind of upsell the idea that milk was beneficial for bone strength, and it was helping everyone. So they're trying to go on this idea of greater good. And then can be related, but not always, with cause related. Think Patagonia when you're doing this, right? So Patagonia, things like sustainable, things like Tom's is another good example. If you buy a Tom's, if you don't know if it's one for one, you buy a shoe, they donate a shoe to a child, or I think it's a child in need, or at least a country in need. I know they donate a lot of shoes over to Africa. So it's a one for one. I buy a shoe, someone in need gets a pair of shoes. So it's a cause-related advertising. So those three things together, really what tie in advertising as a whole, at least on the corporate level.